Thank you for listening to the Distinguished Physical Education Podcast. I hope that you all are having a great summer break and that this episode helps you start your school year strong. Quick reminder that there are still some spots available in the DPE virtual course and that you can earn up to 100 hours toward your license renewal or 3 graduate level credits through CSU Pueblo that can be used toward a lane change on your district's pay scale. If you're interested, click on the link in the description or email me at gary@distinguishedpe.com for more information. My guest today is Rhys Meredith, who has been teaching since 2009. For the past 5 years, Rhys has been an elementary PE teacher at the American International School of Budapest. Previously, he worked at Korea International School on Jeju Island, South Korea, as well as in Doha, Qatar. He began his educational career in his native United Kingdom with positions as an elementary homeroom teacher in Brighton and London. Rhys is a strong believer in the importance of student voice, where students are seen and heard and take responsibility in their learning. I can't think of a better way to build the foundation to a productive school year than by listening to this episode. Rhys and I discuss how to create co-agreements with students, examples of what they look like, and the impact that they have on student behavior and class culture. We talk about incorporating student voice and the importance of clearly communicating expectations for transitions. We also get into the instructional side of things and discuss standards-based content and language objectives and how to communicate them in student-friendly language. Rhys was also generous in sharing some of his resources, and you can find those linked in the description to this episode. And now I bring you Rhys Meredith. Rhys, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for the invite. Really looking forward to the next hour or so and talking PE.
Yeah, me too. I've really been looking forward to this conversation because the way that you emphasize student voice and inclusive practices in PE is going to be very helpful for the teachers who listen. I think it would be best if we just begin at the beginning. So at the start of the school year, you take the time to co-create class agreements with your students. That approach kind of sets the tone of a shared ownership throughout the course of the year. Can you walk me and listeners through how you introduce this process with students and why you think it has such a positive and lasting impact throughout the year?
Yeah, certainly. So also my background is I was originally a homeroom teacher as well before moving into solely teaching PE. And this is something that I've done with every class that I've ever had. And I feel that this could transfer to any class, any single subject teacher could do this to help them build the relationships with their students, especially at the start of the year. I create a class contract for how that we're going to behave throughout the year. And it's giving the students the voice. So everything that the students do and say comes from them. And so how we're going to behave with each other is their voice, their choice, and it really gives them the ownership of their learning. So in the first lesson of the year that we'll have, I'll explain that to the students that I'm giving you the ownership. You choose how things are going to be this year. First of all, I invite them just to do a turn and talk with a friend, give them 30 seconds to a minute, and then we come back together. And then I asked them, can anyone share anything that they said or anything that they heard somebody else say? So then it's a more inclusive session that we're having. And then I'll just simply get them to call out what they heard, and they can indicate if they agree with what's been saying. And then I'll write it all on the board. And then with the wonders of technology now, I'll just take a picture of it on my phone and then come back to it later. So in the next lesson, when they've created all of the things that they want to have in the lessons, I've written it all up in positive language and positive context. And I've put pictures with it to help our EAL students. I display it and say, hey, this is what we said last time. How do you feel about this? Now you've had a couple of days to reflect on it. What do you think? And if they want to add anything, or if they want to reword it, or if they want to change something or take it away, then we do it then. And then we make a commitment to it, and students and teachers sign it. And then I'll print it off and then I'll display it in the gym so it can easily be looked at and revisited whenever needed. So it's really, really good for them. But then also as a teacher, I can add in things as well. So if something's missing that I feel needs to be put in, then we can have that in as well.
So you set the tone for this inclusive environment from the very beginning, right there at day one. I wanted to ask you one follow-up question. What is the prompt that you give students for that turn and talk on the first day of school? You said something like, what is it that they want to have in the lessons? What type of questions do you ask them to get them to create this co-agreement?
Yeah, so it's how do you want other people to treat you, and how do you want behaviors to be from other people, and how are you going to treat other people? And I find it's a really positive way to go because it gives students the ownership and gives them the positive behavior about what it looks and also what it sounds like as well. And if they're not following it, then we can look at the agreement and say, hey, we agreed at the start of the year that we're going to follow this. And also the students can add to it as well throughout the year. If something comes up as well, it's a working document. And also it just lets the students know that I take what they say seriously and that they're listened to.
The fact that this is a living document throughout the year is just so impressive. That must have such a huge impact because students know it's not just something my teacher is going to do in the first week of school and then we're going to forget about it. One thing that I'm thinking about is that if you have each of your classes co-create an agreement on what they want PE to look like, how they want to treat each other, how they want to be treated, you might end up with 12 different co-agreements. Do these look similar from class to class, or how do you manage and respect each individual class's agreement without being overwhelmed yourself with 10 or 12 of these documents?
I think it's vital that each class creates their own one to let them know at the start of the year, this is what your class said, this is how you want to be treated. I do create the 12 different documents, and at the start of the lesson, I'll make sure that that class's one is up on the wall and for everyone to see. I think the students like that I'm taking the time to honor their specific voice and that I'm taking what they say seriously and that I'm really listening to what they're having to say. And they seem to respond well to that. And it helps to create a good, inclusive, respectful PE lesson.
What are some things that you notice that students say when they're creating these agreements? What is it that, generally speaking, most classes want out of their PE experience?
As I said at the start of this, I feel that it's a lot of what should be in any classroom. There are two or three that are only for PE, but basically most students, and this is from grade 1 to grade 5. So I'll ask every one of the classes. It's mainly listen, talk in a calm voice, show respect, have fun, include others, keep and be active, follow instructions, play fair, be safe, be kind. And then the only one which was really only for PE is win well and lose well. But I suppose that could be in other lessons as well, but that's very particular to a PE. So those are the ones that came up a lot. In theory, you could just have one document, but it's not that much extra work and it makes a bit more impact on the students to have their own.
Those are incredible. The fact that students can come up with those concepts of, like you said, this is what any high quality PE program should include. Students get to have ownership over that, because they are the ones that came up with what they want the class to look like. The one that I appreciate the most that you just mentioned is the winning and losing in appropriate ways. I don't know if there's a national standard here in the States that uses that language, but we actually have one here in the state of Colorado that says that students will learn what it looks like to win and lose in socially appropriate ways, is the language that they use. I love watching lessons where a PE teacher is teaching that type of content, those social and emotional skills, because those are things that transfer into other contexts. You can see students winning and losing in appropriate ways that they learned in physical education out at recess, on their soccer team that they play on the weekends. So those always kind of strike a chord for me, those social and emotional skills.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but I find that the winning and the losing And speaking to people in a calm voice is especially difficult when they're doing invasion games. So for us, and we'll probably come on to this later, but that's something we have to be really like strong with, especially in the invasion game settings, because emotions are heightened, they're moving more. Those are sometimes the sports that the students care about a bit more because they do it outside of school, and because that can also really like ruin a lesson. If someone's not doing that, then that can really like ruin a lesson for any student. So that's why it's really vital thing as teachers to really teach that and talk about what that sounds like in PE, and really praising the students who are doing that and trying to make them role models for the other students.
Well, that leads us into the next question that I wanted to ask you, which is how you use these co-agreements throughout the course of the year. They're generated early in the year. You modify them as you see fit with student input throughout the year. How do they help you redirect behavior when students aren't meeting expectations? You already mentioned that you might focus on some of these co-agreements during various units throughout the year. If you know that your invasion unit is coming up, before you start to get into that first lesson, you might remind students of the co-agreement that they came up with about winning and losing in socially appropriate ways to kind of set the tone for what's coming for the next unit. How else do you use these co-agreements throughout the course of the year?
Yeah, I think it's also important thing to say that I try and use positive language. So, like the students, when they're coming up with what they want, they'll say things like, "Don't shout, don't punch," for example. So then it's up to me as the teacher to change that. I don't like to have know this or know that. So, for example, if a student says "don't shout" is important to them, I will say, "I really like that, but I would like to change it to, instead of don't shout, talk in a calm voice," and encourages the students for what to do instead of what not to do. So all of the agreements are framed with positive language to help the students be their best. As for the how it helps the students, if the students aren't showing what's on the contracts, then we can go back and we can look at it and we can say, we wrote down that win well and lose well is something that we said we needed to have in PE lessons. Like, what does that look like? What does winning well and losing well look like? Like, what are you like exactly doing with your bodies? How are you talking to people? What are your expressions looking like? So that also really helps as well. Something else I do also is I ask the students, I'll pose them a question: what do you need from Mr. Rhys to be your best in PE? And so that kind of holds me responsible as well. So that also reminds me that I have to create the atmosphere, environment for the students to be their best. So some of the things that the students have said that they want me to do is give choice, be kind, be fair, don't allow cheating, give water breaks, and even join in some of the games with us. Then we can also, as well as looking back at how the students are doing with their contracts, we can go and look back how I'm doing. Am I doing those things? Am I being fair? Am I giving them plenty of breaks? So that holds me responsible and accountable as well.
So much of what you do is proactive. So you're not reacting to student misbehaviors when they happen. You're setting up an environment where all students feel included and have voice and feel safe and welcome, so that you're heading off much of the misbehavior that might happen later on down the line. The fact that it's a living document also allows you the opportunity that if a student is not following one of the core agreements, you could always ask them if there's something about it they want to modify, right? So you can
Yeah.
lean back on what you talked about early in the year and said, you know what, you said that we should all speak kindly to each other. I'm noticing that during this activity, some of us are not speaking kindly to each other. Do we want to go back and modify that? Or do we still think that speaking kindly is one of the values that we should uphold in PE? And you're going to get all students saying, yeah, we should keep that one. We don't want to get rid of that one, but it helps refresh it in their memory. So I think that's incredible. Also, the other thing that I picked up on what you said was, I've been calling it like a customer service approach. So you had said something like, what is it that Mr. Rhys needs to do in order for you to be able to live up to this co-agreement? All of those things are going to set you and your students up for success where you're dealing with a lot less behavior. Maybe you tell us, is that true? Because unless you've been doing this from day one, you have probably something that you can compare and contrast. I don't know. In your first couple of years of school, you were probably just telling students the rules, like so many of us do. What do you notice about the differences between when you were just telling students, hey, I want you to be nice to each other. I want you to be respectful. I want you to be, appropriate winners and losers in games versus now when students are creating it themselves? Do you notice fewer behavior issues?
Yeah, certainly when we give the students the ownership, they really rise to that. And something that's also important is to be transparent with the students and give them reasons why that we're doing things. So, for example, like the reason why we're going to do things in certain lessons. An example would be we were going to go outside and practice T-ball striking all today, but because it's raining, we're not able to do that. We have the gym, but we don't have the space to do the activity that I said that we were going to do in the last lesson because we can't have 20 students striking T-ball tees in a small gym safely. So instead of that, we're going to play modified games of T-ball inside the gym in small-sided teams so you can get more action in the games. Now, that only takes less than 30 seconds to say, but the students really like the fact that I've done that and that I'm being transparent with them. I think it's also like teachers as well. Sometimes when we're talking with other teachers, we want to know the transparency and why we're doing things certain ways. And I kind of related that to the students. And so the students would probably want to know why I said we were going to do this, but now we're going to do this. So it enables the students to see that I'm trusting them and I'm letting them know exactly why that we're doing certain things. And whenever I'm saying things like that, I can see them like nodding along. Oh, yeah. I see why we're doing this. And also students, when they're giving their opinions on things, I say to them, ultimately, I'm the teacher, so I have to make the final choice at the end. And so everything that you're telling me is going to go towards me making that choice so that they're clear on what they're telling me and who's going to make those choices in the end. So yeah, that's also important to help build trust and keep behavior good and keep the students happy in PE.
This approach that you take is really holistic. It's not just about creating agreements with students. It's in the majority of the decisions that you make, you are taking student input. So it's like the exact opposite of probably what some of our teachers did when you and I were in school. The reason that we were doing things was because the teacher said so. End of story. You really build this inclusiveness and student voice into almost everything that you do, it sounds like.
Yes, certainly. And I think what you were saying there about what it was like when like we were at school, like the teachers were doing their best, but maybe they didn't know that this was an option for them. So I go back to what it was like for me at school and what I like to have been asked my opinion on things like, yes, not expecting the teacher to do exactly as I say, but to have that voice, to have that platform to choose what we do and why we do it. So that's why I feel it's really vital now that I know better for the students to have that input.
Let's shift gears just a little bit. One of the things that we talked about in our messages back and forth over the last month or so was how you respect student voices during the process of picking teams. You brought up to me a great dilemma that a lot of PE teachers face. Students want to pick their own teams. Teachers want to honor student voice in that process, but we also want to make sure that everyone feels included and that it's not 30 or 40 years ago and we're selecting teams and having a draft in PE class. We know that we're trying to avoid those types of things for a whole host of reasons that our listeners know about. How do you navigate selecting teams, still giving students some voice in that process and protecting that culture of respect and belonging that you are building?
Yeah, I mean, picking teams has probably been one of the most trickiest things I've ever had to experience since I've been a PE teacher. And it's such an important thing for the students, and being on the right team and being with the right people can really make the difference between having a good lesson or not for the students and for the teachers. Ultimately, as PE teachers, we have to make a judgment call on what we think. And I'll ask the students, do you want me to pick? I feel like I know you pretty well, so I feel like I could pick fair teams. And often the response I'll get is, yeah, you pick sometimes, but then we'd like to pick sometimes. So like you're saying, I feel it's an important thing to be transparent with the students and to give them a voice as well. Something I don't like to have, I think, which you've spoken about before, is I don't like to have captains and then always being like the people being last. I don't want to have that. I'm not sure that's a psychologically safe way to choose the teams. But I do want to honor the voices of the students who do want to pick. And so sometimes I will let them choose, but I'll give them strict guidance about how the teams are to be picked. The teams must be mixed, not all the experienced or strongest people in one team. And then ultimately, when you feel you've got a fair team, come to the teacher, myself, and I will ultimately make the final call. So I've done that before. But then something recently is what I've been doing. I've been saying to the students, you pick a partner that you would like to play with and be on your team. And so when students have picked their partner, I will put two partners together that I think would work well together and would be a fair and balanced team. And then they go off and play. If, for example, I have to break up a partnership due to numbers or just that it's not going to work, I will be transparent and say to them, hey, for this moment, we don't have the numbers where you can be together with your partner. But instead of that, you can play against your partner and you'll still be in the same game. So they still be with their partner, but just not on the same team. And again, you can see them nodding and saying, yes, I get it. I can see why that's happened. And it just goes to create that trust between student and teacher that I am listening to them. And if I have to make a decision, that I'm giving them a reason why. And it's not just because, oh, I feel like it. So the students respond to that and they just accept it and get on with it.
I remember you and I messaging back and forth about that hybrid approach where a student picks a partner and then you pick the partners that you want to pair them up for a team of four with. So I'm really glad that you shared that with our listeners, because I think that's just such a brilliant approach. It gives students a little bit of voice, but then it also gives you the ability to say, we're not going to have the four top athletes in the class dominating every single activity that happens. It also ties back into the social and emotional skills from our standards that we kind of mentioned briefly earlier, where students have to get along with each other and learn how to work and cooperate and collaborate with each other. So I'm going to call it Rhys's hybrid approach from now on.
I like that.
Another component of a high quality PE program that you and I have talked about a little bit is how important efficient transitions are. You mentioned that you wanted to be a little bit more intentional about them going into this year, specifically about how students enter the gym. That's like such a powerful moment, and sometimes it gets overlooked. Oftentimes it can be the difference between the rest of the lesson being carried out effectively or not. The way that students enter the gym really sets the tone. What are you thinking about changing or trying differently this school year, and what prompted those shifts?
First of all, as a teacher, I want to create the conditions necessary for students to be their best in every lesson. And as you were saying just then, it is so important and it can make or break the lesson the way that they enter the gym. And so that's why I want to be clearer about the routines for all the students. I actually heard your interview on the PE Insights podcast, and it got me thinking about the routines and how to think about them clearer. When you start off as a newly qualified teacher, your behavior management is kind of the thing that you focus on the most. And now this is coming up to year 17 of me being a teacher to every grade level there is to in elementary. Just over the years, I've just overlooked the value of the routines just because I feel like I know better. But now that's just really helped me go back to the basics and to be very intentional about the instructions as we would do about the activities that the students are going to do. I regularly co-teach with my fantastic co-teaching partner, and we're very much aligned with our values. So it would be something that me and my co-teacher would be looking to create so that we were on the same page going forward. I think getting the students to enter the gym calmly, respectfully, and in a way that they're going to be their best is such a powerful thing. And also when sending the students off, having given the instructions, getting them to walk, because the kids, they just want to get started. They're so happy to be there. They're so happy and excited, but just getting them to walk to where they need to be and get started and not just sending them all off at the same time helps to avoid a crush and all that. Something I've done is having time to reflect on it at the back end of the school year is I'd say, anyone whose shirt color is mostly blue, you go and walk there. I'm not picking on certain people. Anyone whose name begins with A, B, C, D, E, F, G kind of thing helps them to go off and walk to where they need to be. And where I'm putting the badminton rackets or the balls or wherever, I'm putting them specifically in purposeful places, so like 2 different locations, so everyone's not running to one corner of the gym. There's a couple of places around the gym that they can be. And also something, just like a phrase that I heard you say during the podcast was, I'm so excited to share these 3 activities with you, but I need your cooperation and listening to make it happen. That seems to gather them in and make them realize that, we want to be here for these 45 minutes and we want to be as active as possible. So that's something that we're looking to do. And as I say, we'll be creating very clear routines for entering the gym. Looking forward to having that in place. And it will just create just a calm, respectful environment and experience for the students. And hopefully this could transfer throughout the whole school to help improve the behavior throughout the whole school and to have that impact, and just how positive a vehicle for change and for positivity PE can be.
You brought up so many important points, as you have been doing for this whole conversation. Explicitly telling students what you want them to do with their bodies, whether that's walking or sitting in general space or in a home base spot, telling them what to do with their voice level, reminding them of where the equipment is going to be and that we're all not just going to rush over to one bin. I'm making the connection now between what you just said about like being excited about the lesson and telling students, I need your help in order to get through these 3 activities, and connecting that with what you've been talking about with student voice. It's not, I just have these 3 activities that I hope that you all get to play today. It's, in order for us to do that, we need to exhibit on-task behavior as a group, and we really need to get moving. So it's always like a we and a community aspect. One of the things that I admire about your approach to teaching is how you build resources around these expectations that you've been sharing with us. You also shared some really amazing visuals with me around your class agreements and expectations for student behavior. If there's anything that you want me to link in this episode, I'll put it in the description if you think that teachers could benefit from it. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you develop those resources and how they've helped support your classroom culture?
Yeah, for sure. So as I was speaking to earlier, we have the class agreements, but we feel like with invasion games, we need to step up our social and emotional learning game. So when we start invasion games, we'll still have the class agreements and expectations, but we'll switch it to what does respect look like in PE. And again, we'll ask the students to create that themselves. This time, instead of having one for each class, we'll create one that works for all the classes, so it's the same expectations for every student. And also, we target this with invasion games because, like I was saying before, the students are moving more, emotions are more heightened. They generally seem to care about invasion games more because it's games that they play outside of school on a more regular basis, like soccer and basketball. So there's some students who are really, really passionate about it. So we'll ask the students to turn and talk, what does respect look like in PE? And then we'll ask each class from grade 1 to grade 5, and then we'll come up with one document for all of them. And what things that they'll say is, this is an example from this year's one. It's celebrate respectfully, be kind, be safe, try your best and have fun, listen, help others, follow the rules, include everyone, act and talk calmly using kind words, and win well and lose well. So again, like with the class agreements for each class, I'll take their feedback away and come back to them with a poster that has all of those things on, with visuals to help their English as an additional language learners, and say, how do we feel about this? Does this look right to you? Does this look like something that could work, especially for invasion games? And whenever they say yes, then we commit that to paper and stick it up in the gym. And we have copies of it to take out to the field as well. So it's a mobile document. Also, we have the opportunity to really dig into what some of those aspects look like. For example, one of the things that was said for showing respect in PE is celebrate respectfully. So then we can talk about what respectful celebrating looks like. And we can ask the students, what does that look and feel like and sound like to you? And then we can create our own little sub poster that comes off it. And what the students were saying was, don't get in people's faces, celebrate small or in your head for like 2 seconds, high fives at the end if you win or lose. And we also link that to if they wanted to play soccer and represent the school in a tournament, when they were playing soccer, either at recess or during PE or however that they were behaving, if they wanted to represent the school, which is a big honor, then they had to be following these things. And regardless of how good you are as a player, we're not going to take you unless you're showing these things absolutely all of the time. So that really helped the students to be their best selves in PE lessons. Now, we'd also like it to transfer to recess when there's a bit less structure, but we try and remind them with that. That's something that we talk about and we share with the students and hold them to account. If they're not, we can say it here, hey, you scored a goal there, great, but then you ran to the corner of the pitch and was jumping around, is that respectful celebrating? Maybe in the Premier League or in the Super Bowl, but it's not the World Cup final here. So that's just something that we can say to the students, and they seem to respond well to.
All of these social skills that you're teaching students come directly from standards that we have here in the US, whether it's national standards or standards for each individual state. I know that standards are a little bit different over in the UK. Maybe you don't have a national standard. Is that right?
I teach in Hungary at the American school, so we do actually follow shape standards. I know that there's new ones, so that's going to help me to know them a bit more intimately, and to make sure that we're letting the students know that this is also what we are supposed to be teaching you as well, which might be another string to our bow there.
I just think that you're making such brilliant connections between standards-based social skills, co-agreements for what PE should look like or what students want it to look like, what behavior expectations are. All of these things are just so masterfully intertwined by you. So I'm just so impressed every time you speak
Yes.
towards these various concepts. You also mentioned visuals, in that it's really important for students to just have those visual reminders. You never know how many students are going to look over at that poster that you brought out to the field, and it'll just be a quick reminder and plant the seed in their head that the next time they score a goal, they're going to celebrate quickly in their own head, as opposed to acting like they just won the World Cup. And I also appreciate that you mentioned it's important for those English language learners as well to have those visuals as they start to learn a new language. Since we talked about standards a little bit, I'm kind of excited to move over into our next topic, which is content and language objectives. You mentioned that you read that chapter in the book and that this was something that kind of stood out to you. What was it about CLOs that connected with you, and how do you think that implementing them in your lessons will shape your students' experiences in PE?
Yeah, so kind of going back to what we spoke about with routines and entering the gym and things, that's sometimes something I've overlooked over the past few years. So to my fault, I haven't been looking into them as clearly as I was by reading the chapter. But it just reminded me of good habits that I learned when I was being trained in the UK as a homeroom teacher. We always had an objective for the lesson displayed, and the students knew it. And so that's something I'm going to look to be more intentional about with the students this year, because I feel that direct teaching needs to be there and to be at kind of the forefront of everything we do. Each lesson we should be directly teaching the students. I know there's a lot of exploration and students choosing their own challenge, but there has to be some aspect of direct teaching. I'm teaching you this, consider this while you're exploring. So that's something that I'm going to look to do to make sure that I'm really intentional about this year. It's going to help the students know what they're learning. It's going to help me ensure that coverage is thorough, that the students have a clear progression for how they're going to go forwards. And also it will help the students to reflect on their learning and the success they've had during that lesson. So really looking forward to being more intentional with that. Have you got anything else that maybe I could be focusing on with that? Or is there anything else around CLOs that could be of a benefit?
I think I'll just take a moment to remind listeners what we mean when we talk about CLOs. I'll also point them back to episode 8, I believe it was, where Jen and I did an entire episode about content and language objectives. So if a listener hasn't heard that episode yet, I encourage them to go check that one out next. When we talk about content and language objectives, the thing that really drew me towards them was that you're giving students the opportunity to demonstrate physical progress towards something, like every PE program in the world does. You're also adding on an extra layer of giving students the opportunity to articulate what standards-based concepts they're learning as well. So it's not just about getting better at a specific physical skill. It's about being able to describe what that skill looks like, or compare that skill, like dribbling in soccer to dribbling in basketball. You're giving students the opportunity to use language to demonstrate to you that they understand the clear focus, the clear objective of that particular lesson. I just feel that they really up the level of any PE program. Most building leaders or administrators, when they come into a gym, they just expect students to be doing something physically. When they also see that a PE teacher like you is giving their students opportunities through a turn and talk every now and then to articulate their learning as well, I think that the impact that it has is not just on student learning, that students can walk away from a lesson and say, hey, this is what I learned in PE today, instead of I played soccer today. It also has a positive impact on the reputation of a PE program, so that, when certain decisions or cuts have to be made, whoever's making those decisions thinks back and says, well, the PE program at our school is something that we're really proud of. It's not just a glorified recess program. That's like real standards-based learning that's happening in there. So again, CLOs are important to me because of all of those different things: clear targets, student language, and the reputation of a PE program.
That's a really good reminder. And that's something that I'm certainly going to be focusing on next school year, and looking forward to sharing how that journey is going.
The next topic that you and I were going to talk about were how to use stories to communicate objectives, because what you just mentioned a couple of moments ago was one of the important things about content and language objectives is how you communicate them to students in student-friendly language. I think this is interesting because when you and I were planning out this question, I think that we might mean different things. And I'm really excited to hear what you mean, because I think you might be opening my mind to something completely different, which is going to be super cool. In the book, I talk about how you could use a story to communicate your objective. So if you want students to learn how to win and lose in socially appropriate ways, which is the example that you and I have been using throughout our conversation today, you might start out with a story and say, I was watching a World Cup game last night, and I noticed that one of the players, ran into the corner and jumped into the crowd, and the other team really didn't feel good about that because this person was gloating. I want to make sure that I teach my students in school, in my PE class, how to win and lose in socially appropriate ways. So we're not going to act like we're in the World Cup. We're going to act like this. And then you give some really specific examples. Is that what you were thinking? Or I think some examples that you had were how you could actually bring in short stories that students are learning in other contexts from their classes into PE? Because if that's what you meant, I can't wait to hear about that.
I was thinking the second thing that you just said there, but I do remember hearing that. I think it was in the PE Insights podcast that you were saying that about how to use the stories with your example about winning and losing well from the World Cup. So that's something I'm going to try and remember to do. So again, such a simple thing to do, but such a powerful tool. Something I've been trying to do is teach movement through stories, especially with our younger students in second and first grade. I made contact with our first grade team and just said, are there any stories that you're reading that have the opportunity for the students to move? Was kind of the original thing, just as simple as that. So I could read the story and the students could act out what they were doing, and it might help to engage them well. My son is going to be in first grade next year. So now I'm just thinking what he would like to do and what would be engaging for him. I reached out to the first grade team and they said, yes, we have the story about why it's important for people to follow rules. And it was a book called What If Everyone Did That? I said, oh, great, that we have some standards here about standard 3.26. It says describes why rules are important for safety and fairness. And so we read that book and we acted out some of the pages and what was being taught in the book. And so that was just a good way to teach that standard of why it's important to follow rules for safety and fairness, and also to teach some of the locomotor skills and the concepts of space and effort, to kind of teach those together. And it's just a good way to introduce it in an appropriate way for the younger students. I didn't do that the whole year, but I did it where it was appropriate to do so. So I'm looking forward to expanding that program while using the stories to teach some of the social standards as well as some of the locomotor skills standards as well.
I see so many benefits to this approach that you just detailed. It's a cross-curricular connection, which is super important. It's going to help students learn better in both PE and in their homeroom or in their classroom. Again, going back to the reputation of a PE program, you're showing that you're not isolated on an island in the gym. You want to know what students are learning in the classroom and how you can be creative and make connections to our own standards in order to support that learning in the gym as well. The whole time you were saying that, I was just smiling and nodding because that was just incredible. I'm so glad that we had that misunderstanding about stories and CLOs. That worked out really well.
That wouldn't take up a whole lesson, but it would take up a part of a lesson. And especially as what I found out with the grade ones is that you almost need to break up your lesson into 3 separate parts at an absolute minimum, so having that for like 15 minutes, part of that helps to break it up and to keep them interested and engaged and get them to make connections outside of PE as well.
You mentioned too that it's not something that you feel like you need to do for every single lesson or every single unit. You just do it when it feels right, like when that connection is appropriate. So maybe in some of these cases, it's that you created a new intro activity, a new warm up that has to do with a book that they're reading in their homeroom class. It may not be the whole lesson. It might just be that, hey, I know that you're reading this book, What If Everybody Did That? I think it's such a cool book too. I was reading it to, my son who's in first grade. I actually made up a warm-up game that has to do with that book. Do you all want to play it today? Right. So you just kind of make those connections. And I just think it's a brilliant way to get students to learn in both content areas.
Like I was saying before, like I can be in my own little silo in the gym and PE office. So that's why a target of mine is to find out what they are doing in their homerooms and relate the lessons a bit more to that.
Do you ever ask any of your building leaders or other colleagues to come in and see some of the things that you're doing? Because I just feel like you're doing so many brilliant things in your space.
I mean, we have an open door policy. Anyone's welcome anytime to come in and see. And I always value feedback. That's why I was so glad when we were talking before that some of the feedback you were giving me and just this conversation that we're having is just great feedback for me to know how we're doing and things that we could potentially do to improve. So I'm always very, very grateful for any feedback from anybody.
Well, whether it was during our text conversations or this episode that we recorded together, I learned a lot from you as well. So I really appreciate how reflective of a teacher you are, how willing you are to share your experiences and your expertise with everyone who's listening. I'm so glad that we connected.
Thank you. Thank you for the platform to hear, first of all, from other teachers from your previous episodes, but also for me to be able to share. Hopefully some people can pick it up and just give it a go in their classrooms and gyms.
They absolutely will. And hopefully you and I will do it again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Gary. Really, really appreciate it.